aspirants, looking at the current affairs for 11th of 10 2018, the Hindu analysis. So these are the important news items to what has been picked up for today's newspaper. So let's look at them in detail. The first one, how was the decision on Rafale made? Asked the Supreme Court. So here we know that the Dassault Aviation and also the Rafale deal, which is between India and France, which has been repeatedly there in the news with respect to how was the deal stuck, and they also had an information about the offset, where they've been calling Anil Ambani's Reliance to be as one of the offset partner when it comes to the Rafale part. So this was also being repeatedly there in the news with the opposition party raising the questions. This was something to do up with the scams as well. So on limelight of it, there was numerous of petitions to what the Supreme Court was hearing. On various petitions here, the Supreme Court now has submitted the kind of an informations or a notice has been sent on to the government to submit the details on the decision making process in the Rafale deal. So how was this particular process being dealt and how was the deal fixed? So they just want to know to what was it is all about, and they have to send it in the sealed envelope by October 29th. And the Supreme Court also made it very clear that there is nothing to do with a kind of a clarification. It's just that it wants to know only the decision making process. And they said that you don't have to disclose the price of the fighter jets as well, or technical practicals is not been allowed. You don't have to do that, but just that you give me the details to how was the process being struck. So decision making process, that's only details to what has been asking here. And it also informed that it was not something it is giving any formal notice to the center. It was not a formal notice, rather it is just asking them to give the submission. And we know that we have the Attorney General who is the defendant in terms of the government, and in this case it is KK Venugopal who is actually opposed the petitions, and he said that this is something to deal with the political motivations and this has to be dismissed and this cannot be entertained by the courts. And he also informed that they would not be able to show any of those particular informations because of the grounds of the security of the nation, as well as the issues have been related to the defense procurement process. So this was one of the reply to what the Attorney General has been giving on to the situations to where the Supreme Court is asking to submit with the petitions. So again, you should know in detail that Rafale is a two-engine, in sense a twin engine, which is called as an MMRCA. It's a medium multi-role combat aircraft, and it has been manufactured by the Dassault Aviation. So there is a French firm, as we discussed in the beginning of the video. It's all about it, and here most of the people were asking to get a proper outcome of the information. So how is this being done? Because they assume to be it is as a corruption, and they want to quash the entire deal to what is being made between India and France. So on these aspects is what the Supreme Court wants to know, how was the decision made. So if it is on a fair basis, then they would be continuing with the deal, otherwise they have to quash the deal in return. So any which ways, this information is not coming from the Supreme Court on quashing it. The people have been requesting in quashing the deal in return. That's all about it. It's just a development story to what we are seeing from the past couple of weeks and months. So that's about it. And the next news item, more horror stories of MJ Akbar pour in from women journalist. So we know that a movement has been started right now, that is Me Too movement. So as this is getting day by day more popularized with the different people sharing their experiences on the sexual harassment, so here it's a time for the journalists also to share their sexual harassment, where the senior journalist Priya Ramani, she was the first who revealed the sexual harassment of MJ Akbar in the 2017 Twitters with respect to talking about she had written a kind of an wrote a story about, and that was on the boss, and she mentioned that boss is none other than the MJ Akbar's. As she revealed this particular information, there was most of the other journalists who also started joining to the Me Too movement, and they started sharing the same incidents to what had been facing by them by MJ Akbar, who has been sexually harassing the women. And one such journalist was Ghazala Wahab, is one such who came against Mr. MJ Akbar, and also Stuptapa Paul. She was also one of the person who came or who spoke about the harassment to what she was been facing. And Sabah, she was also been talking about the experience to what she has been faced Mr. Akbar on the sexual harassment. So there is like a nationwide wake up call with respect to the sexual harassment to what has been happening, and the stories which has been shared in the Me Too movement. So it's about it. And the next one, EPS 95 members file petition in Supreme Court. So here we have a writ petition. So this writ petition has been filed to the Supreme Court, and this was being filed by the retirees and also the employees who are the members of the Employees Pension Scheme 1995. So they are the one who have actually filed a writ petition right now. but we'll understand to why the writ petition is being filed, because earlierly EPF August, that is in the month of August 28/9/2014, there was an amendment and they raised the wage ceiling amount for the scheme to be as 15,000. So this was one of the amendment which had come into contribution, so that the contribution of the higher salary for the existing employees would be introduced with a cutoff date from September 1st, 2014. So this is what was being introduced, and this was an amendment happened in 2014 August 28th and set up September 1st, 2014 to be as a cutoff date. So in the October 2016, the Supreme Court had actually struck this cutoff date clause, and after 2 months we had the Central Board of Trustees, who's been part of the EPFF, that's a Employees Provident Fund organization. They decided to compile with the order to what the Supreme Court had given and allowed all the members to get benefited of the pensions of the higher salary, because here if you see in 2016 the Supreme Court had cut off that it's not any requirement to give any cutoff date for the people to get it. But as when there were people who have been not actually listed under the unexempted companies, they moved on for their EPF office, and the time they started applying it, they had been denied by saying that they had not applied within the cutoff date. And this was something where it brought a kind of a remitted funds or a full salary of the EPF account to what they have been eligible to get on. They were not been allowed. On these grounds is what now there are two important in sense organizations which has been signed and apart with 4 individual petitioners who have put a petition before the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court is going to hear the petitions on November 16th, which is the next petition which would be heard on November 16th at the writ petition. So here there are 4 people and the individual organizations of 2. One is the National Confederation of Retirees, represents which 42,555 retirees from the private and also the public sector. So all are the members of the EPS 95, and also another one is the National Confederations of the Officers Association, represents which almost like 19,118 people which are currently working in the central public sector organizations. So all of these members are the ones who moved with the EPS 95. So now what they're looking out is that they wanted the Supreme Court to quash the 2014 demand as well as the 2017 circular, which has actually excluded them from getting the rightful benefits under the EPS 1995. So there is a confusions, and the authorities of the EPFO have been saying that they have not been compiled as per the required timings, and that's the reason they have been excluded them in return. So the next hearing of this writ petition would be happening in the month of November 16th. So that's about it. And the next news item, the government sets water flow target for river Ganga. So this is for the first time the union government has mandated a minimum quantity of water where it has to take it as a scientific circles. So the National Mission for Clean Ganga, it has laid down certain flow of kind of in specifications to how it has to move on. So here we have from the upper stretches of the Ganga, that is from the glaciers of Gangotri, from there to the until the Haridwar, they have to maintain a proper flow of the water. For example, we have like 20% of the monthly average flow of the preceding 10 days, which has been between November and March, which is of a dry season. This is what the flow should move on with 20%, and 25% of the average during the lean season, which in the month of October, April and also the May. And 30% increasing would be happening with respect to the monsoon months of June and September. So this is one of the important kind of a flow specifications toward the National Mission of Clean Ganga has been talking about. And here there are kinds of main streams of the Ganga which have been actually been divided to how much of the waters they have to send it on. So this is actually from the Haridwara to Unnao. So here we have the specifications based on the minimum flow on the barrages. So you have the Bhimgoda, which is in the Haridwara. This has to ensure that a minimum of 36 cubic meters per second it has to be flowed between October to May, and 57 cubics in the month of monsoon. So during the monsoon times, that's the barrages at Bijnor, Narora and Kanpur must maintain at least of 24 cubics in the non-monsoon months. So this is about the maintenance level to what they have to do it in terms of it, and this is between the October and May month, and 48 cubics during the monsoon month. So this is for the first time the government has come up with these kind of specifications to how the Ganga water has to be flown on from different barrages and how it has to reach and how much of the cubics of the water has to be released in return. So this is about it, and there were eminents who were also talking about this was a good beginning to get a proper target low, but they were saying that the target to what is being given as 20, 25 and 30% and 36, 57 and 24 QMEX were being very low. So they actually have to revise the numbers and it has to be in a upward way. So this is one important suggestions which has been coming from the eminent personalities. So this is about it, and for your preliminary examination you have to more focus on the National Mission for Clean Ganga. So anything from these 20, 30, 25% the questions have been very rarer, but from the organizations which has been taking as a important structures to clean the Ganga, this has to be taken into consideration, just so you can focus on these particular aspects. The next one, low turnout again in Jammu and Kashmir civic polls. So we saw the couple of days that just a day before that there were urban local bodies of elections to what has been happening in Kashmir. So we saw the first division of Jammu, which was been recording with almost like 78.6% of the polling. So this was been when compared to the 214 votes witnessly, and in the Kashmir division which had happened the earlier day, it saw almost like 3.4% polling in 49 votes. So this was the main highest was 35.6% in the Bandipora recording. So this was something important, and what they're trying to say is that the Kashmir Valley has been recorded the turnout of to be as 3.4%. So this is actually the second phase of the urban local body elections which has been happening in Jammu. So they were just comparing on total, you can say that the civic polls turning out for the polling were being very lesser, so comparatively to the earlier year. So this is about it, and in which ways the elections which has been gone in a peaceful manner. So there was no problem with the peace of the place that was being maintained. So this is about it. And the next news item, the Reliance choice was must, Dassault official. So this is again a continuation story of the Dassault Aviation. This is a Rafale deal which has been between the India and French. So here the issue what is here, the news is all about that a journal called the Mediapart, which has been a part of the French independent investigation journal. So there now they have again said that the Anil Ambani's Reliance Defense were as an offset partner was an imperative and it was mandatory. It was nothing as per to what the French government had to plan on. To what the Indian government has said is what they are doing it, and this was again a kind of a justification and specification what has been coming from the France again in different media reports, which has been lingering the same issues again and again, as each and every time we have these issues back in their country, and this is also the connections which has been happening in our country. So it's just a development of the stories to what has been happening. So you don't have to be worried about these things, but you have to know is more that you have to get in touch with what are these fighter jets is all about, which is a country which is coming under the deal. So once we have anything with respect to Supreme Court giving a verdict or continuing with the deal or scrapping the deal and all, then we'll get to know them in detail. That will be more than sufficient. And there was one person earlier the month, Mr. Arun Shauri. So he was actually the former union minister, and the lawyer Mr. Prashant Bhushan, they actually submitted a 32-page complaint. So under the Prevention of Corruption Act and further documents, and urged the Central Bureau of Investigation to open a probe. So this is an advanced step to what has been happening right now, where they are asking, they have submitted a complaint and also the documents in the name of the Prevention of the Corruption Act, and they wanted the CBI to investigate on these particular aspects to what is actually happening with respect to the Rafale deal. So that's all about this. That's it. You don't have to do anything apart from that. Just understand the timeline to what has been happening. That would be sufficient. And the next news items, LIC owned stocks hit hard. So here you have the LIC, which is having the connections and the shares in the other set of markets. So actually the LIC is the largest domestic institutional investor in the Indian equity. Right now it has been getting hit hard by the corrections to what has been happening in the stock markets. So we know that the latest one, the ILNFS, which has been completely there as a debt equity, which has been under the problematic situations right now, where it has been sold off and the things and a new board of members have been coming on to the streams to do a proper assessments of the liabilities, and also the asset management has to be done on the way it has to be done. So as these things were there, and we also know that the LIC was also been one of the important shareholder when it comes to the ILNFS. So it had had a good deal and a larger deal as well. And apart from that, this is something where it's getting also been hit by the stock markets, which is also getting corrected with the creations of all these aspects which is being chained together. And here we have the value which has been eroded by almost like 50% in the current calendar year. So this is about the holdings of the shares of the insurance companies, And they were also talking about the small insurance companies which they've been owning. Also, they have been seeing a repeated fall, which is almost like 70% in 2018. So this again like being as a huge price fall which has been happening. And here they were also talking about that the LIC had a direct stake in more than 300 listed companies. So this was at least like 1% of the stake, and 24 entities which amounted for almost like 10% of the total stake. And one of the most important highest stake and the largest stake to what the LIC had it was in the LIC Housing Finance with almost like 40.31% of the part, and this has also fallen to be as 24% in the 2018. So which means that there is a fall in the prices also as well onto the LIC Housing Finance. So you can see out here. So here we have the LIC Housing Finance, and there's a current updations, and there's other changes which has happened in the near future. So this is about it. So likewise, you have been listed with all the companies to what has been there. You can just look on to them. And then we have the LIC again giving like what is the role of the LIC, because it has always been a market where it is having a very steady flow of the fresh money, and it has also been seeing a huge surplus. So this is like something where the government has been first port of calling it, and since he is a long term investor and he is the one who buys the shares whenever the market dips. So here he has been almost termed to be as a market saver, and whenever the market is been dipping, he comes and purchases with the shares and investment happens. So the recovery of the markets happens well. So this is what they are giving the term or a role of the LIC to be in terms of the stock markets. But here most of the participants who have been there as an insurance company, they are saying that it is investing almost like 7 to 8 billion in the equities every year. So a long term investments at the interim fall should not be the major concerns right now. So this is what they are doing is for a long term investments for whatever the interim falls that are short term happening. So this should not be a matter of concern. So it can be negligible, and they are also saying that it is a one which gives a steady flow of money in return. So things can be taken into control is what the news is from all about. So this is about it. And the next news item, the coal shortage hits the aluminium units. So here we have the Aluminium Association of India, which is actually written to the government that you have to stop prioritizing the coal company to power plants. So here this is with respect to the directions of the government which is being coming from September 22nd, where it actually directed that the state run coal companies to first send the coal rigs to the power plants as they were facing the acute shortage of coal. So here since the shortage of coal was being faced by the power plants, here the government had actually directed the state run coal companies to actually send the coal racks to these power plants in the first phase. So now here the Aluminium Association of India has written to the government telling that you don't have to prioritize, because even we have been finding problem with the same, and exclusion of these particular industries are actually put us under more trouble. So this is what the Aluminium Association of India wants to convey to the government. And they were also talking about where this is a sector, it's already facing the problem. So here it's an additional problem to what is coming. The first problem to what is been facing is that it has been dumped with the scrap materials of the coal from the US and China. So they are also raising the import tariffs on each other products. As they've been rising with the import tariffs, the domestic markets back in India are already suffering out of it. And this diversions to what has been happening has actually made the coal crunch situation for the aluminium sector as well. So aluminium sectors are being not able to have a proper coal, and that has become a crunch in nature. So because most of them are being diverted to the power sectors. And they were also talking that they didn't had given any kind of an advance notice to what has been happening from the government, or they didn't had any time to even think or to have a mitigating plan. How is that we can go about it? So they were not being planned well, because it was sudden shocks to what the government passed it, and they have been starting facing the crunch right now. And this was a grief to what the Aluminium Association of India has been putting on before the government to look on. So this is also a sector which has been facing the problem right now. So this is about it. And they also, one of the eminent persons from the Aluminium Association, he also mentioned that one of the major issue which is actually affecting the aluminium industry is that the US and China have levied the import tariffs on each other. So this has actually allowed the larger economy, and they are also scrapping a lot of those to come back to India. And moreover, the domestic players are the ones who have been badly hurt with respect to this wide scale dumping which has been happening back in the country. So this again the griefy person to what has been from the aluminium industry is trying to put forth. and this is all about, and they were talking about some electricity demand where it has been growing, and in the power supplies which has been taken off, and this is actually affecting the logistic supply of these particular plants. Aluminum smelters, they were talking about that even it requires an uninterrupted power supply. If there are no proper power supply for 2 hours or more, then the freezing would happen of the aluminum pots, and this would shutting off the plant for almost for 6 months. So this might also in return affect the entire industry in return. So they are just saying that one side is being focused on the other side also there would be a damage which would be happening in return. So they were trying to tell their points to what is the problems to what they would be facing now and also in the near future. So this is about it. And the next news item, the electronics policy moves to regime of soaps. So here we have the government has released the draft national electronics policy under the targeting with almost a turnover of $400 billion for the electronic system design and also the manufacturing sector. So under the ESDM, they wanted to have a turnover of almost like $400 billion, and this would be with a target of to be as 400 billion. For that, the government has released the draft national electronic policy. So here the targeted production is to be as 1 million mobiles handsets by 2025, and the value is almost like $190 billions, which has been including 600 million mobile handsets, which has been valued to be as $110 billion. This is for the export purposes, and here the policy is also suggesting for the replacement of MSIPs. MSIP is nothing but a modified special incentive package scheme. So here this was actually introduced in the year 2012. So as per this, there would be a capital subsidy which would be available for the non-special economic zones, which is for the electronics industry which has been located in this particular area of 25%, and the areas which has been located with respect to SEZ, they will be getting a 20% of the capital subsidy. So this would be with almost like September 30, 2018, there were like 265 applications which was being proposed with an investment of 61,925 crores, and this as received under the MSIP. So what we just discussed, and out of that 188 applications have been proposed, the investments with 40,922 which has been approved so far. So the investment worth would be around 8,335 crores which has been made by 139 applicants. So this is one important aspect, and EMC is nothing but the electronics manufacturing clusters, which is also launched in the year 2012. So this would be taking care of the product. They will be looking out to the quality infrastructure within the clusters, and there would be around like 50% of the project cost for the greenfield EMCs, and 75% of the project cost would be given for the brownfield. So this is purely under the EMC which would be given, and this would be granted by the ministry in return. So this is one important aspects with connections to the particular replacement of the MSIPs. So here they wanted to guarantee new units and also the expansions of the existing units in electronics manufacturing sector. So this is just like a credit default guarantee, and also encouraging new units to come and get expanded more into the electronics manufacturing sector. So this is the main bill's focus is all about, and it also said that it will also recommend the direct tax benefits. So these direct tax benefits would be giving them the investment linked deduction, at the same time setting up a manufacturing unit or expansion of the existing unit, so that I can even have a manufacturing or they can expand even the existing unit. And the draft policy also pitched the support for the infrastructure development. So this is through the formulation of a new scheme to what we just saw, and there will also be doing a suitable modifications when and there required for the existing EMCs, that electronic manufacturing clusters. So the entire concept is that they wanted to support both the greenfield as well as the brownfield manufacturing clusters. So by supporting both of them, the manufacturing sector in the electronic fields might be standing more better, and they wanted to also establish a standard setting body. So this is under the MITI, that is a Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, to develop a standard for its electronics, IT, e-governance and also among the others. So more the standards you're getting to whatever you establish, the things would be able to capture the market for a longer run. So this is all about the main introductions as per the draft national electronics policy. So this has been released as per now. So this is about it. And the next news item, the government clears the closure of 2 jute PSUs. So here the government has approved for the closure of the National Jute Manufacturing Corporation and also a subsidiary which is called as Birds Jute and Exports Limited. So this company have been actually closed right now, and this would be as per the guidelines which is being dated to June 14, 2018. So here whatever the proceeds they have to do with the sale assets, or after meeting all the liabilities, the rest of the amount it has to come back or deposited back to the Consolidated Fund of India. So there's again a direction to what the government had given, and here they were also talking about the land management agency which has been engaged for the disposal of the assets. So LMA would be the one which would be disposing the assets, and also it directed the LMC to carry out through a verification of the assets before they would be taking up with undertaking any of the disposal in accordance with their DPE guidelines. Before they dispose any of it, so they have to just do the verification of the accounts and then they have to move on. So this is again a direction to what is being brought for the before the land management agency. So this is how they have to do on. And they also said that the benefit of this decision would be that the exchequer should not be burdened with expenditure of keeping the two PSUs running. So at any point of time the burden should not be posed on to the exchequer, where he has to do a lot of expenditure in just in running the two PSUs. So it has to be closure, and this is what has been the cabinet which has been approved for the further two. So this is all about, and this is what they have to do as per the guidelines of the government. So this is about it. And next one, the question for the day, we have to list the coal reserves of India, which means that company this is there in the news papers in repeated. So just try to locate them, because UPSC would start giving you all the different locations of the coal reserves and ask you all to find out and written. So if you know the where and which place they have been located, it becomes easy for preliminary exam. Secondly, what is a Me Too movement? So here you can just talk about the other sexual harassments and how it started, what is the origination of the Me Too movement, to what extent is it going, what are the pros and cons on the other aspects. So you have to just brief on it. This will be more than sufficient. And the news items to what we have been picking is the ones which has been repeatedly there and which is very important for your UPSC exams. So unrelated one which is not be or demandful for your exams, we have not been picking up with those particular topics. So what we pick up would be more than sufficient, and these are the questions which would be coming in your preliminary exams, and these are the areas to where you have to focus on. So you don't have to do a multiple things for one particular current affairs. Hindu would be more than sufficient. With the Hindu, what we are trying to give here is that give you all a proper kind of an information on the happenings what is there. So after that, we finding out the extras or the back end story is left up to you all. So here you have to first know to what is the news is all about, which has been completely coming repeatedly. The more you get to know like what is the situation. So here the current affairs is just episodes what is been coming one after the other. So here once the episode is end, after that you can start doing your other researches, write your answers and find it out. But first, before that, you should know what are the things which is required, and based on that is what we are giving you the current affairs in return. So just try to make use of these current affairs. So that's all about it, and these are the important news items for 11/10/2018. Thank you.